Maybe you've heard of the tragic story of the 4 dead girls, aged 5 to 16, whose decomposing bodies were found by U.S. Marshals in a Washington, D.C. apartment in January 2008. Their mother was arrested for the murders, and 6 child welfare workers were fired. Kathy Lopez, a social worker with the Booker T. Washington Public Charter School, went to visit their home when one of the girls stopped coming to school. The mother refused to let Miss Lopez into the home, after which Miss Lopez called Child Protective Services requesting an investigation. Unfortunately, nothing was done. Miss Lopez then made a call to police expressing her concerns and frustration that nothing had been done, but was transferred amongst several city departments. Again, no investigation ensued. It was only when U.S. Marshals were serving an eviction notice that they discovered the dead and decomposing bodies of the 5 girls. An estimated 899,000 children were victims of abuse in the United States last year. In 2002, 53,000 children died as a result of homicide worldwide. 1,460 children died in the United States as a result of abuse or neglect. 3/4 of these children were under the age of 4. Approximately 77% of all childhood deaths are caused by one or both parents. In 1970, 1 in 10 children were born in the United States were born to unwed mothers. In 1980, 1 in 5. In 1995, 1 in 3. By 1985, half of all couples who do marry cohabitate before marriage. And 1/2 of all first-time marriages end in divorce, which is double the rate of the 1950s. Families are struggling. Families are hurting. Families are in crisis. I want to share with you some steps that we can take to help bring healing to our families. Step 1, know God well, His methods, His principles. Now, this may sound like a Christian cliche, but do we really know Him? 2006 news report. Nearly 450 Christian churches in the United States yesterday celebrated the 197th birthday of Charles Darwin. The churches say Darwin's theory of biological evolution is compatible with faith and that Christians have no need to choose between religion and science. Some churches sang praises for tall boiling test tubes in classrooms and labs. Many churches held adult education and Sunday school classes in evolution, and ministers preached that followers of Christ do not have to choose between biblical stories of creation and evolution. A variety of denominational and non-denominational churches, including Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Unitarian, Congregationalist, United Church of Christ, Baptist, and a host of community churches participated in the event. More than 10,000 Christian ministers signed a letter urging school boards across the country to preserve the integrity of the science curriculum by affirming the teachings of the theory of evolution as a core component of human knowledge. Do we really know God? His law of love? Do we really believe God is just like Jesus? Or have we seen Him differently? And does it matter? I've already given you brain science that shows that the God you worship changes your brain. The God of love helps your brain grow healthier. Other God concepts harm the brain. Paul tells us in Romans that when we exchange the truth of God for a lie, the mind becomes depraved, futile, and darkened. The mind cannot be healed without coming back to a knowledge of God, and our families cannot be healed without coming back to a knowledge of God. 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. But mark this. This is how Paul starts out. But mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Notice, these are not the agnostics and atheists. These are not the irreligious. These are those who have a form of godliness, but they deny its power because they've forgotten the truth about God. 2005 study by Dyslin and Thompson revealed that extrinsic religiosity was a significant predictor of child abuse in the home. Extrinsic religiosity. But intrinsic religiosity was not. Extrinsic religiosity, a list of rules that one must keep. Intrinsic religiosity, developing of one's spiritual character and development. So extrinsic religiosity predicts abuse. 2003 study by Weber and Cummings that physical abuse had a negative relationship with spiritual development. So as people developed their spirituality, their likelihood of abuse went down. But it did not have a negative relationship with religiosity. Religion without knowing God results in greater abuse of our children. 2,000 years ago, there was a group of people looking for the advent of the Messiah. They were health conscious, Sabbath observers, Bible believers, believers in the Creator God, tithe payers, regular church attenders, sanctuary believers. But they believed so many lies about God that when He came and stood among them, they hated Him and they killed Him. They didn't know God. They accepted the idea of God, but they didn't know God. Jesus said, they will come to me at the end of time and say, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name. We've cast out demons in your name. We've performed miracles in your name. Not in the name of Buddha, not in the name of Muhammad. Notice, these are Christians. And He says, get ye hence, ye workers of iniquity. I never knew you. I'm convinced that the number one problem facing society today, the number one problem facing families today, including Christian families, is the truth about God has been replaced with a lie. We have a form of godliness, but we deny the power because we deny the truth about God Himself. We have accepted a false view of God, which is destroying our minds, our characters, and our families. It happened in Christ's day. Science research demonstrates that religiosity without spiritual development results in greater child abuse, and Christ prophesied it would be this way at the end of time. It is by beholding God that we are changed. It is by connecting to Him that we are transformed. It is by uniting with Him that we are healed. It is by trusting Him that we are enabled to love others more than self. Life eternal is that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom He has sent. Our families cannot be healed if we don't know God. Step 1, we must know God well. Step 2, deal with your own self first. Step 2, deal with your own self first. Healthy relationships require healthy people. And healthy people are in governance of themselves. Kevin came to see me tearful, anxious, depressed. He wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, couldn't focus. His marriage of 7 years was falling apart. His wife told him if he didn't get help, she was leaving. He described a marriage in which he worked 60 hours or more per week, and then when he would get off, he'd come home and watch TV. He complained that his wife didn't work outside the home, but she also didn't work in the home. She didn't clean the house, didn't cook, very rarely did any laundry. He described argument after argument in which one of them would complain about the other, only to hear a retaliatory complaint back. He would complain of the house not being clean and not having a meal, and she would nag and gripe about him not helping out around the house. We explored the principle of healthy relationships require healthy people, and healthy people are in governance of themselves. He had the authority to change himself, not his wife. So he began to come home earlier. He began to show his wife appreciation. He began to speak kind words. He would occasionally bring a card or a flower. He would take her out to dinner periodically. He began to help clean the kitchen. He began to actively seek to make her life better and stopped using his energies to try to impose change upon her. And soon he noticed he came home and the house was clean. Dinner was cooked. And she was meeting him and greeting him at the door with a smile and a kiss. We must deal with our own selves first, because healthy relationships require healthy people. Healthy people are in governance of themselves. And healthy people own their own shortcomings. Own their own shortcomings. Stop trying to blame your spouse, your children, your parents for your difficulties and your problems. Adam, it wasn't me, it was the woman you gave me. She didn't bring me the fruit I'd have never taken. I didn't do it. It's all about her. During marital counseling with Sue and Bill, Sue disclosed how she had gained over 100 pounds during the course of their marriage, and now she complained bitterly, angrily, that her husband didn't find her physically attractive anymore. And I looked at her and I said, when you get out of the shower in the morning and look in the mirror, what do you think? She goes, oh, it's gross, it's disgusting, I can't stand it. I said, if that's the way you think, why would you expect him to see it differently? She was unwilling to own her own self-dissatisfaction, instead was putting it out on her husband and blaming him for the fact that she was mad at herself. And in so doing, she was losing the love that was still his. And I asked her, who does he come home to each day? And what does he do spending with his time? Well, he spends it with me. We go for walks together. He rubs my feet when we watch TV. We take trips together. So he spends his time loving you, but you don't appreciate any of it because you're so mad at yourself that you blame him for the fact he doesn't find you physically attractive. Until she could own her own shortcomings, I said, if you're not happy with yourself, then do something about it. We must deal with our own selves first. Healthy relationships require healthy people. Healthy people are in governance of themselves and are able to own their own shortcomings. We must deal with our own self first. Healthy relationships require healthy people, and healthy people communicate well. Communicate well. We must create an atmosphere where it's safe to speak one's heart honestly and openly, where we can express our opinions and our ideas to each other in an atmosphere that is free. So I'm going to give you some steps on communication to help improve communication in your homes. Step 1, first seek to understand before seeking to be understood. First seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Don't be a mind reader. Don't assume. Even if you're right, give the other person the opportunity to disclose themselves. If someone in your family thinks something unkind towards you, something negative, if they're angry, don't you want them to come to you and tell you? And you want them to tell you so you can work it out, right? Create an atmosphere where it's safe. So if they say something that instead of reacting, say, can you help me understand why you see it that way? Can you help me understand why you're so upset? Can you help me understand how you came to that conclusion? Can you help me and others seek to understand where they're coming from? Step 1. Step 2, the next thing you do after they explain themselves, after they give you their explanation, the first thing you do is you thank them. You want to create an atmosphere where it's a thank you for coming and telling me. Thank you for not holding it in. Thank you for sharing what's on your heart with me. Even if you disagree, even if it's 100% wrong, aren't you glad they came to tell you? Then thank them. Thank you for coming to tell me. Identify. Put yourself on their team. Don't go into the oppositional mode of arguing with them about how they're wrong. Thank you for letting me know that's where you're coming from. And thank you for sharing me why you think that. And then after seeking to understand, after thanking, then the third step is correct, clarify, and explain. And think about how that works for you. If you've got something you're wanting to tell somebody, and they say, well, help me understand where you're coming from. And they listen as you explain, and then they thank you. Thank you so much for coming to tell me that. I really appreciate it. No wonder you're feeling upset. I would feel upset too if that's what was going on. And identify with them. Then, but can I share something with you that might help clarify this? Aren't they much more likely to want to hear that? Wouldn't you want to hear that now? Because you know you've been understood, you know you've been heard. But what happens so oftentimes is if somebody says something we know it's wrong, we just argue, no, you're wrong. It didn't happen that way. And we end up arguing. And then step 4. When the communication does identify an actual mistake that you've made, where you've come up short, where you blew it, take ownership. Thank them for telling you and say, you're right, I blew it. Will you forgive me? Will you forgive me? Ron was in his early 30s, married for 5 years to his only wife. For more than half his marriage, he'd been in Iraq with the National Guard unit. He'd been in combat, seen numerous deaths. A number of his buddies had been wounded or killed. And he was struggling to come to terms with these experiences. His marriage was strained. His wife complained that he didn't love her anymore. He would disagree. That's not true. They would argue. You don't love me. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. And back and forth they would go. He learned these tools, and the next time his wife said, you don't love me, he said, can you help me understand why you think I don't love you anymore? At which time she disclosed that since coming back from Iraq, he was distant, wasn't as tender, wasn't as affectionate, seemed on edge, seemed unable to relax around her anymore, didn't sleep as well, was irritable. Now he understood. And once he understood, he thanked her. Thank you for sharing that with me. Let me tell you what I'm dealing with. And he told her about some of the traumas that he was going with and how he was coming to terms, and the symptoms that she identified were symptoms of his PTSD that he was struggling to come to terms with. And when she understood that, then she felt reassured and was able to comfort and reassure him. Healthy relationships require healthy people. Healthy people are in governance of themselves, own their own shortcomings, and communicate well. Healthy families require healthy parents. And healthy parents are in governance of themselves. Roger was frustrated, fed up, overwhelmed, and at the end of his rope when he came to see me, he had 2 teenage sons, and every day they would fight, argue, shout, and scream. Roger would give his sons chores, and when he would come home, the chores weren't done, and he would become enraged and yell and scream at his sons. But the pattern never seemed to change, and every day was a repetition of the same thing, only getting worse. He told me how he felt powerless, helpless, and no longer the man of his own home. Roger had forgotten that his real authority rested in governance of himself. He had forgotten he couldn't control the behavior of his sons and thus lost control of himself, trying to impose control on another. We explored that his authority was to change himself, so he did. He sought to, when he would come home and the chores weren't done, he would first set his sons down and say, can you help me understand why the chores aren't done? And most of the time, they would hem and haw and not actually have an explanation. Well, we just didn't. And then he would stay calm, and he would then express his sadness. I'm so sad that you've chosen to give up your cell phone, car, Xbox, TV, iPad, iPod, and any other of the privileges that the mature get. I was hoping you'd be able to go to that prom this night or that ball game tomorrow, because I know how much you enjoy it, but since you've chosen to not do your duties, then you can't have the privileges that come from the mature. I hope maybe you'll get your chores done tomorrow. And very quickly, things started to improve. He would come home and the chores were now done. Healthy families require healthy parents, and healthy parents are in governance of themselves. Healthy families require healthy parents, and healthy parents remember their responsibilities. Remember their responsibilities. And parents are not, get ready for this, I'm about to blow your mind, parents are not responsible for how their children turn out. Parents are not responsible for outcomes. Parents are responsible for their conduct in parenting. You are responsible for your conduct in parenting, not for how the kids turn out. There are multiple variables that you cannot control, but the big stumbling block to most parents is a proverb. Raise a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. How many have heard this? How many have been abused by this? The sad reality, it's a mistranslation. That's not the Hebrew. Here's the translation. Raise the child according to his way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Let the child dictate the terms of its rearing. Let the child decide when they go to bed, what time they get up, whether they go to school, whether they study, whether they do the chores, what foods they eat. Let the child decide what they watch on TV, what video games they play, and you can be sure when they get old, they will not become a self-disciplined, mature adult. This is not a promise that you do a good job, you get a good outcome. It's a promise that if you do no job, you're guaranteed a bad outcome. How do we know which way? Because honestly, the translation could go either way. So how do we know which is the right way? Well, let's take the case of perfect parenting. A parent who never makes any mistakes of any kind. as in God parenting Lucifer or God parenting Adam and Eve. Did he get a guaranteed good outcome? Because he raised them according to his way, and then when they're old, they won't depart from it. No, it's not a promise that you'll get a good outcome. It's a promise you don't do any job, you get a bad outcome. That's what it means. And there are many influences you can't control as a parent. Many influences. How about you let your child sleep over at someone's house and they get molested there? Can it affect the outcome of your child's life? How about you let them sleep over, and on the way over there's a car wreck, a drunk runs the road, and your child survives, but everyone else is killed, and they are pinned in there for 3 hours with the dead bodies of their friends. I'm not making this stuff. These are true stories that I've had patients go through these things. Do you think it could affect the outcome? They're 7 years old when it happens. Are you a bad parent now? You see, this idea that you're responsible for outcomes is a lie. You're responsible for your conduct in parenting. Parents must remember their responsibilities. And your responsibility is not to be your child's friend or buddy or to get their approval. That's not your job. But to do what's in the best interest of your child, regardless of what your child thinks or feels. I heard one amen. Did any of you take your children to get vaccines? And what was the child's attitude about this? Did they want to do it? Why did you do it if they didn't like it and didn't want to do it? Because you're doing what's best for them, whether they like it or not. That's your responsibility. John couldn't understand why his son was always in trouble: truancy, vandalism, marijuana, shoplifting. But John described a lifelong inability to set boundaries with his son for fear of what his son might think of him. John said he wanted his son to love him and couldn't tolerate it if his son was mad at him, so he never disciplined his son, at least not without asking his son's permission. You won't be mad at Daddy if Daddy puts you in timeout, will you? Healthy parents do what's right because it is right, not because the child will approve. Healthy families require healthy parents. Healthy parents are in governance of themselves and remember their responsibilities. Healthy families require healthy parents, and healthy parents are united in love. Don't allow the children to split the parents, which requires that you communicate well. If your spouse makes a mistake with your child, and it's inevitable. We all make mistakes. When your spouse makes a mistake with a child, don't correct your spouse in front of the child. Take your spouse in the other room, present your concerns, the evidences, and why this is an error, and let the spouse who made the mistake go back to the child and correct themselves. Sheila was a 35-year-old lady who came to see me. She had anxiety, depression, overwhelmed, stress, sleep problems, inability to focus at work. She was married to her second husband and had 2 teenage sons from her first marriage living in the home. She described how her husband would discipline her sons, but she would object in front of the boys. She would tell him to back down, or she would stand behind him and shake her head and roll her eyes for the boys to see. Her family and her home were in constant turmoil, as you could imagine. She learned the importance of parental unity. She went home and told her husband first. She told him what she'd been doing and asked him to forgive her and told him that she would stand by him from now on. And instantly, the husband's anxiety level dropped. His sense of being out of control dropped, and he had a greater sense of peace in the home. And immediately also, next time he had to discipline the boys and mother was standing there side by side confirming and with him, there was a change that came around the boys as well. That they realized that they were not going to be able to do the split anymore, and they started conforming, and the chaos in the homes quickly resolved. Parents, you must also remember that you represent the Godhead to your children. And the devil, just as the devil tries to split the Godhead, he'll try to split you. How did the devil try to split the Godhead? Well, how about this? We have an angry, wrathful, punitive, disciplinary father who must impose punishments on us, but we have a loving friend in Jesus who pleads to him to be merciful for us. How many homes function with mommy begging daddy off, and daddy is going to beat the boy for whatever he's done? Or at least daddy's going to discipline when he gets home. And mommy's going to then comfort when there are tears. It's a split. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are in unity. Parents need to be united in the discipline of their children. Satan tries to split the Godhead in order to undermine our confidence in God. Healthy families require healthy parents. Healthy parents are in governance of themselves, remember their responsibilities, and are united in love. Healthy families require healthy parents, and healthy parents set healthy boundaries and enforce the boundaries they set. Never, I very rarely use, how many times have you heard me use never today? Not many. Here's one. Never set a boundary you're not willing to enforce. Never. And let me explain why. I want you to imagine that your children are in first grade and you've decided that you want to reward them for learning how to spell. So you tell them if they get 100% on their spelling bee, you'll give them $5. And they study, and they come home excited with their test paper 100%, and you don't give them the $5. What did you just teach them? That you lie and you cannot be trusted. Now so and everybody gets that. Nobody does that because it's pretty obvious. How about this? You tell your children if they don't pick up their toys, they can't have dessert after dinner. Dinner comes, sits down to eat, toys are still everywhere, and you go to serve the dessert, and you don't put one in front of the child who didn't pick up their toys. And that child begins to cry and wail and make a scene, and you say, okay, you can have dessert this time, but next time pick up your toys. What did you just teach your child? That you lie and you cannot be trusted. It's the exact same lesson. When you set boundaries and it comes time to enforce them, it is not about the boundary anymore. It's about whether the child can trust you to keep your word. This is critical. Children need to know that they can trust you. If you don't keep your boundaries, then they get insecure, they get anxious, they get upset, they'll start acting out because they want stability in their life. And the boundaries you set provide structure and security. When a baby is born into the world, and moms remember when the baby was an infant, how is it that you get that infant to settle down? You swaddle them. If you don't swaddle them tight, if you just lay a blanket over them, they'll kick and they'll be restless because they've just come out of this nice, safe, small little world where everything was warm and cuddly into this overwhelmingly big universe where it's way too much for them to handle, and it's scary and frightening. And when you swaddle them, it shrinks the size of their universe down to something where they feel snug and safe again. And that blanket is a literal boundary. As they grow older, they go from the blanket to your arms, and they feel safer. And as they go older, they get to your presence, and sometimes when kids get scared at that age, they'll pull the blanket over their head, and they'll feel safer. Why? They've just reduced the size of their world. It's only this now. It's in here. Out there, they've separated themselves. They feel safe. It's a boundary. And the boundaries you set, when you give the rule, you can't go out in the street and play. In the child's unconscious mind, it tells them that the street can't come into my yard and harm me. And they feel safe in their yard. If you give consistent boundaries and keep them. But if you don't, then they don't have that security, and they're consciously anxious, they're uncertain, they don't know what's going to happen, there's no predictability, and they live in constant anxiety and fear. And they'll act out more and more because they want that structure and they want that security. And I don't see many young people in the room. That's too bad. I always give a little secret to the kids in the room. And the secret is, kids, your parents have as their number one goal to raise you in such a way that one day they can quit parenting you. Isn't that true? So if you want more freedom and less parental oversight, all you have to do is fulfill all of your current duties and responsibilities without being told. Keep your room clean, make your bed, do all your homework, be responsible in every way, be where you're supposed to be before you're even told to be there, and your parents will give you more responsibility. You'll get more freedom. But if you like that oversight, that scrutiny, that parents in your business all the time, then don't make your bed, don't clean your room, don't do your homework, don't be where you're supposed to be, and parents will come down on you because you're telling them, I need more oversight, Mom and Dad, I need you involved more. Isn't it right? Step 1, we must know God well. Step 2, we must deal with our own selves first. Step 3, have a vision, a godly vision. A vision for yourself, a vision for your family, an eternal vision, a vision to be like Christ, to be the healthiest, most Christ-like husband, wife, parent, or child through God's grace you can become. Have a vision for your children, a vision to see them become like Jesus in character. Set your number one goal for parenting to use your influence, not number one to get A's, not number one to get rich, not number one to get recognition or gold medals or blue ribbons or into medical school. Number one is to develop character like Jesus. We all too often mistakenly put our number one goal as getting ahead, success in the world, promotion of self. There was a 1997 Sports Illustrated poll of 198 aspiring Olympic athletes. Powerlifters, swimmers, sprinters, and others answered 2 questions. First question, you are offered a banned performance-enhancing substance with 2 guarantees. 1, you will not be caught, and 2, you will win gold in your competition. Would you take it? 195 said yes, 3 said no. We have a character problem. Second question. You're offered a banned performance-enhancing substance with 3 guarantees. You will not get caught. You will win every competition you enter for the next 5 years, and you will die from the side effects. Will you take it? More than half said yes. Parents, we have a problem. We have a problem in America, in this world. We all too easily take our eyes off of Christ and we set an earthly vision. Getting good grades, getting first in contests, winning at all costs, self-promotion, self-exaltation, self at the center. Make Christ's likeness your number one goal. Step 1, we must know God well. Step 2, we must deal with our own selves first. Step 3, have a vision, a godly vision. And step 4, create an umbrella of love and live under it. See everything through the eyes of love, through the law of love, through the lens of love. A member of my Bible study class shared some time ago some valuable wisdom. He said in class, my wife's not perfect. Everybody kind of laughed, but he said, but I know she wants to be. I know she loves me so much. She never wants to let me down. She never wants to disappoint me. She wants to be a perfect wife. And so when she does make a mistake, I know that she's already disappointed in herself before I even find out about the mistake. So I'm not mad at her because I know it wasn't intentional. And I'm not perfect, but I want to be. I love her so much. I never want to let her down or disappoint her. I want to be a perfect husband. And she knows that. So whenever I do make a mistake, she's not mad at me because she knows that was not my intent. Create an umbrella of love and live under it. How do you experience the members of your family when they make mistakes? Imagine being on a ball team, say a softball team, and one member of your team is kind of awkward, discoordinated, trying his best. He's got the attitude that she's 100% putting into this. Whenever he strikes out, he's got tears. He comes in early. He stays late. He practices harder than everyone. But he strikes out more than everybody, drops the ball more than everybody. But you can see the pain in his face whenever he makes a mistake and hurts the team. What's your attitude towards that person? Do you want to help them come out earlier? Help build them up? How about you got somebody on your team who's a jock? Could be pro. And they strike out, and they drop the ball, and you believe they're throwing the game on purpose. What's your attitude toward that person? When your family members make mistakes, how do you see them? As the person that's making a mistake but doing their best, or somebody who's throwing the game on purpose? And then you attack them and want them off the team. We need to create an umbrella of love and live under it. So step 1, know God well. Step 2, deal with your own selves first. Step 3, have a vision, a godly vision. And step 4, live under an umbrella of love.